Okay, two things before the video proper begins. First, a shout out to Brett McGowan. He doesn't do anything on his channel anymore, but it was his videos that got me into Werewolf the Apocalypse in the first place, and the Fianna were his favorite tribe. So, if by any chance you happen to see this, Brett, thanks. Second, after reading through the official book for Werewolf 5th edition, I have found very little to recommend it to me, at least in terms of lore. Those who are actual tabletop players might be able to confirm or deny whether or not the mechanics of version 5 are better than previous ones. So for this, I'm mostly going to be sticking to the revised and 20th anniversary editions for the lore, with one or two exceptions. So, let's talk about those great lovers and fighters, singers of songs and bashers of metis, the Fianna. It began on a winter's evening in the dim and distant past, in those foggy days before there was even the concept of history, back when Gaia was still young and the werewolves were relatively innocent. A young Galliard paused in the midst of a deep forest and howled a song to the gibbous moon hanging above his head. He sang of life and all the joys it had given him. He sang of sorrow for his lost packmates. But whether its strains were of joy or sorrow, the song echoed with the fierce life that beat within him, that beats in the hearts of all werewolves. He thought himself alone, but then another song arose to answer his own. But where his voice was fierce and lusty, hers was sweet and clear. This song spoke of longing for the werewolf, for the sorrow of his mortality, but joy of the vitality that lay within him and his voice. Then she came from hiding and joined him, and on seeing her the Galliard's heart broke within him, for hers was a beauty beyond mortal ken. She walked on two legs, and in many ways resembled humanity, but this was no earthly woman, for there was a glamorous, dreamlike quality to her that simply could not exist in the world of mundane physical reality. And yet there she was. The two sang in harmony, and then spent the night in wolf form, chasing after the moon. Then, as the moon set and dawn broke, they came together as man and woman. Great and mighty was their passion, but when the werewolf awakened from his stupor, she was gone. It was a full 9 years and 9 days before he saw her again, and when she came to him, she was accompanied by 2 children, a girl with the elfin beauty of her mother, and a boy who bore the fierce, feral aspect of his father. She said unto him, "Behold the fruits of our joining. My daughter shall reside with her kin in the lands that know no death, but I gift you with your son. May he live with your people and stoke the fires in their hearts against all the cold winters to come. May the bond of blood between them wax strong in the coming ages." And with that, Danu, mother of the Tuatha De Danann, departed from this world with her daughter, leaving behind her son, a werewolf whose voice could shame the songbirds and make hope bloom in darkness like flowers in the bitterest winter. The first of the Fianna songkeepers, although the name Fianna didn't come to them for quite some time. As you might imagine, since the Garou pass on their stories through oral tradition, and that a lot of this happened back in the foggy days of prehistory, it's unsurprising that the Fianna themselves have no idea exactly when their tribe differentiated itself from the rest of the Garou nation. But like all the tribes, they eventually acquired a totem spirit that became the particular guardian of their tribe as a whole. In Werewolf 5, the story goes that in the ancient days, when the werewolves had no home, they came across this gorgeous-looking stag, and they decided to pursue it in wolf form across the entire world. Across mountain, plain, and forest they pursued it, and when they finally cornered it, the deer revealed that it was no mere deer, but Stag, the totemic spirit. "Your faith and drive are admirable," said the spirit. "Look behind you. Look where we have ranged together. Pledge yourselves to me, and I grant you this, your home and the husbandry of all we have crossed to come here." Some of the werewolves accepted this offer, and so a tribe distinct from all the others was born, although they wouldn't call themselves the Fianna for millennia to come. Great Stag is a powerful totem of respect, and like many such great totems, has a brood of somewhat lesser totems that follow in his wake, which are loyal personally to him and are more favorably disposed towards those whom Stag himself favors. Morrigu, the Mistress of Battle, a fearsome and demanding spirit that assumes the forms of a warrior woman and a carrion crow. Brigid, a spirit of inspiration and creativity, venerated as a patron of smiths, healers, and poets. Epona, the fleet goddess of white horses. Hearn, the hunter, who strikes down his foes from deep cover before they even know he's there. Even Danu, the mythic mother of the Fiana, can be called upon, although this is very, very rare. Stag himself can assume 3 different aspects. The White Heart, representing the passion and romance that is key to the culture of the Fiana. The Horned One, which represents the masculine power of nature. And finally, Kurnanos, in whose form Stag can unleash his many spirit companions as a wild hunt upon his enemies. Like all spirits, though, Stag demands a price for his favor. It is his ban that any werewolf that is pledged to him must help the Fae and their kin under any circumstance, which only further reinforces the ties between werewolves and changelings in the modern Knights. On the other hand, Stag's ban in Werewolf 5 is equally valid in terms of lore and the Fianna culture. In this version, Stag cleaves to the old laws of hospitality. If a werewolf that is pledged to him allows a guest to come to harm under his own roof, then he is sure to lose the totem's favor. But of course, we must now come to what every tribal history must address: the Imperium and the War of Rage. As far as the modern Knight Fianna are concerned, both events were a mistake. A big mistake. But of course, these regrets are the benefit of thousands of years of hindsight. At the time, the Fianna handled their end of the Imperium like the culling of livestock. They mostly focused on eliminating the weak, as well as those who were getting a little too big for their loincloths. They often raided the other tribes for human kinfolk, just as their kinfolk raided each other for cattle. And of course, they chose the best and the most worthy to be mates. Unfortunately, especially as the elders see it in the modern Knights, the Fianna could sometimes be a little too indulgent of their human kinfolk. When humans first learned metalworking, most likely from the Weaver, many among the tribe were divided as to how to respond to this. Most settled for killing the humans that had obtained this knowledge. After all, a slippery slope is not always a fallacy. If humans could smelt copper or even bronze, who's to say that someday they would not figure out how to make iron weapons, or worst of all, silver? However, as the human population grew in spite of the culling, the children of Stag noticed that those humans armed with metal had a distinct advantage over those armed with mere stone. While most werewolf tribes view their kinfolk as essentially breeding stock and nothing more, the Fianna tend towards a more paternalistic view, viewing their kinfolk as part of the family. And so, to give these human kinfolk an edge against rivals, the werewolves who had once killed a human for so much as carrying an ingot of bronze now actively encouraged their human kin to make metal weapons. Of course, according to the lore keepers and elders of the tribe, this was the moment where it all started to go wrong. At any rate, the Imperium officially ended with the Concord and the establishment of the Litany, but in reality, the Fianna carried on the Imperium for centuries afterwards, just in a more covert way. Before the Litany, werewolves would attack human settlements themselves. After the Litany, they would find a strong and capable kinfolk, hype him up with songs of his bravery, give him a weapon, and point him and his tribe at the nearest enemy. And thus, the Fianna encouraged war among the various humans as a way of keeping their numbers down. Imperium by proxy. And if said kinfolk war leader decided one day that he was feeling his oats and might stand up to his guru masters, well then, the werewolves would intervene more directly. He'd soon learn, although not for long, that his weapon and his new human followers wouldn't matter much against a pack of werewolves. As for the War of Rage, the Fianna bitterly regarded as nothing more than a war fought for pride, and as a result, they and their cousins in the other tribes must to this night reap the harvest of that sin of pride. The Garou had two great advantages over the other changing breeds in the War of Rage. One, they had been specifically created by Gaia to fight and destroy, whereas the others had all been made with different tasks in mind, though arguably the Rokea would have been quite formidable given their job was to steward the entirety of the oceans. But secondly, and more importantly, the Garou worked in packs, whereas most of the Pharaoh operated alone. Meaning that in most encounters during the war, any Pharaoh, were he were-shark, were-bear, or were-cat, when confronted by a pack of Garou, would find himself or herself both outnumbered and outgunned. And so the Garou slaughtered their allies and their equals, all to prove that they were the best and the most deserving of being in charge. The tribes came up with 1,000 justifications, especially as the war dragged on and blood called for blood, but in the end, that was what it was all about: pride. The werewolves tried to earn the right to rule. Instead, they earned the right to stand alone against the waves of enemies that now break against them. But in the case of the children of Stag, there was one lone exception during the War of Rage. One changing breed that never felt their claws: the Korax, or Werecrows. The children of Stag had long and ancient ties with the Korax, and so when the War of Rage began, they were granted shelter and sanctuary. In return, they would alert the Fianna to enemies and prey. The Korax have never forgotten this debt, and are in the modern nights the only changing breed that doesn't hate the Garou. That said, it must be stressed that this relationship is exclusively between the Korax and the Fianna tribe. The fact that the Fianna spared the Korax deliberately is not widely known outside the tribe, either among their fellow werewolves or the other changing breeds. In the end, like all things, both the Imperium and the War of Rage came to a close. And as the gauntlet, the barrier between the physical and spiritual world, became more pronounced, and the two worlds diverged further and further from one another, the children of Stag, along with their human and wolf kinfolk, migrated ever westward, finally setting down amidst the woodlands and vales of Western Europe. And it was here that their human kin became a race and a culture all their own: the Celts. It is the Sengoku Jidai. Besieged and surrounded by his enemies, a lord pays a group of men to see his only child to safety. But do they have the skill to ensure her safety? And can they even be trusted? For this is an age of honor and treachery, of blood and valor, of gold and steel. Now available at Amazon, Smashwords, and at StudioBrainstorm.net. Links in the description.